Verse 14 says, "And the Word was made flesh and dwelt among us." Now he's referring back to what he started with when he said, "In the beginning was the Word," and it was in that perfect, ideal spiritual realm. But now it says, "The Word was made flesh." In other words, he became part of this physical world. Was made flesh, and he dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory. The glory as of the only begotten of the Father. And then he says, speaking of Jesus, full of grace and truth. Very easy to read over these words because it just sounds like little flowery words you might put in a Hallmark card. Full of grace and truth. Okay, keep reading. But I want to stop there for a minute. When he says Jesus was made, speaking of him as the Word. And by the way, when he does that, when he refers to Jesus as the Logos, he's reminding us of the fact that he was pre-existing with the Father in the ideal, perfect, unseen world, but he took on a body and came into our imperfect world. And it says, we beheld his glory. John was one of the disciples. He saw him. Glory as of the only begotten of the Father. And he says about Jesus, he's full of grace and truth. Now, when we read, let's talk about truth first. Truth, when we read truth, we think truth as opposed to lies. But really, what he's getting at when he says truth is truth in the sense of what's real. He is full of grace and reality. See, the whole idea that of the Logos, of the invisible ideal, is in Plato's philosophy, is that the things that we see in this imperfect world are not the true reality. The true reality is the unseen world. And as Christians, we believe that as well. The ultimate reality is not this physical world, because this physical world is temporal and changeable. But the unseen world, the spiritual world, is the real thing. So John is saying here that Jesus became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory. And let me tell you something about him, John says. He is full of grace, and he's the reality. He is the reality. But notice now he says he's full of grace. What is grace, by the way? Well, we're going to talk about it just for a moment. Grace means, it's the Greek word is charis, and it can be translated gift. Sometimes it is. It's just purely translated as gift. Like in 1 Corinthians chapter 12, when he talks about gifts of the Spirit, in the Greek language it says charis, grace. Grace gifts. We're going to go on reading here and we'll find out some more about what grace means. It means what God gives. And Jesus is full of that. He says he's full of grace and truth. John, that is John the Baptist, not the author of this gospel. John bore witness of him and cried, saying, "This is he of whom I spoke. He that comes after me is preferred before me, for he was before me." Verse 16, "And of his fullness have we all received, and grace for grace." I like what the Amplified translation says here. What the Amplified translation is a translation made by Greek scholars with the idea in mind that the Greek words have far deeper meanings than can be easily conveyed in a single English word. Elliot, would you put the Amplified up here for me? Listen to this. "For out of his fullness, his abundance." What is that fullness? We said he's full of grace and truth. Remember that? Jesus full of grace and truth. So he's got an abundance of that. Whatever it is, we're going to find out here. "For out of his fullness we have all received." We have all a share, and we all are supplied with one grace after another. Now, stop right there for a minute. What the translators of the Amplified translation many times do is when a word has a fuller meaning than can be explained in a single English word, they give you the various shades of meaning one after the other. And that's what he's doing here. He says, we have all been supplied and receive one grace after another. And now he decides to say it, the translator says it another way so you understand what grace means. One grace after another, spiritual blessing upon spiritual blessing. So you could say grace is a spiritual blessing. And even favor upon favor. Grace means God's favor. And gift heaped upon gift. Now, even if I wasn't stopping and explaining every minute, this sounds pretty good, doesn't it? A spiritual blessing upon spiritual blessing, favor upon favor, gift heaped upon gift. Now, this is a amplifying of what it means that he's full of grace. He's full of and bestows us with spiritual blessings, God's favor, and gifts heaped upon gifts. Now, I just like the sound of that, gifts heaped upon gifts, That makes me makes me happy. I like that idea. Now notice when we talk about favor and spiritual blessings, and especially when we say gifts, it implies something that is unmerited or unearned, and that's what we're going to see here more plainly in just a moment. I like where it says favor, God's favor. That means, you think it counts for anything to have God's favor in your life? Well, yes, I think that really does. And what he's saying here is Jesus comes to grant unto us God's favor. Now, again, keep in mind everything we just read. All we've done, all the recipient has done is believe on Him. That's all I've read so far, that He's implied or said that we're supposed to believe in His name and to receive Him. And for those who believe in His name and receive Him, He comes bearing gifts, and first He said we can call ourselves the sons of God. That's a real privilege. That's what He called it. And of His fullness we've all received spiritual blessing upon spiritual blessing, favor and gift. Now, a very interesting and remarkable verse. Go back to the King James, Elliot, in verse 17. Keeping in mind everything we've just read. Why does he say this? For the law was given by Moses, but grace and truth, or grace and reality, let's say it that way. Grace and reality came by Jesus Christ. Why does he bring this in? Why does he start and bring this in? Well, he's referring, of course, when he says the law was given by Moses, he's talking about what happened in the Old Testament. But, and the word but there means a contrast. And I hope you can see that he is making a contrast. Moses brought the law, but Jesus brought grace. Can you see that he's contrasting the grace of God that Jesus brings with the law of Moses? Now, what it means is, and the reason he brings this up is, he's trying to make a point in a subtle way, or maybe not so subtle way. He's trying to make the point that what grace is God's favor and God's blessings and God's gifts that are unearned or undeserved or unworked for. Because the law is all about what we do. The law is all about what the person under the law does. The law is all about human performance. And the way it works is, if you read it, it's very clear. If you keep the way the law works is, you have to do the performance. You have to keep the rules, and then afterwards, if you have kept the rules perfectly, and it is true, it's very specific. You have to keep all the rules without breaking any. If you keep all the rules, then you are blessed. Now, if you want to read it, and I'm not going to take time to read it right now, but I'll just refer you to it if you want to see how it works. Deuteronomy 28, if you read that whole chapter, it is comprised of two things. The blessings of keeping the law and the curses that come from not keeping the law. And he's very pointed in saying the person who does all these things is blessed. Now, the law works this way. Human performance followed by the blessing. But did you notice that when he's talking about Jesus, he says he comes with blessings, and he gives us the blessings first. The way grace works is we get the blessings first, and then our human performance follows out of that. Or we might say it this way, walking in the light of, or walking in the strength of, or walking by means of these blessings that he has given us. It's a total inversion. It's totally turning it upside down. And I don't want to be very plain and say it to you that way. It's not the same thing. It's a total flipping upside down.